Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guest today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. Today, we're going to have a very meta conversation. We're talking about 4 steps to get an ROI from your podcast. And we're having this conversation on my podcast. So we're going to see how many of these 4 steps I got wrong. Maybe did I get any of them right? I don't know. Is this podcast just a sham and you shouldn't be listening to it? We're going to hear all about it from our amazing guest, Karen Roberts. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
So you have to tell me by the end of the episode, you have to just expose me to the listeners if this podcast should just be shut down and never listened to again. Or
I've already listened. No, you're on track. You're on track. Fantastic.
Fantastic. I love it. Well, I'm curious because podcasting is not a new medium I see, but I also see a huge growth in both people guesting on podcasts, people creating podcasts. I think 70 million people create a podcast a day. It seems like that's not a true stat. But what got you into podcasting in the first place and helping people grow their podcasts?
I fell into this is the honest answer, right? Coming out of lockdown. Well, in lockdown, let's go back to lockdown. I had just launched a speaking career, live events, teaching actually about the health benefits of the ketogenic diet and fasting, right? I come from health and wellness industry, teaching fitness for 25 years, a sports therapist for 27 years. So completely different, right? And then, of course, lockdown hit. Oh, dear, I've just wasted thousands doing this thing. What am I going to do? And I didn't want to do it online because I had, if you can remember that awful time, I certainly wasn't following a ketogenic diet. I was getting a bottle of Prosecco in every night, and I didn't want to, do as I say, not as I do. And I was thinking, right, what am I going to do? So I put on an online summit. I had 20 speakers, coaches teaching from a physical, mental, spiritual perspective. And on the back of that, I was offered a radio show, weekly radio show. And I just said, yeah, didn't know why. Didn't know what I was going to do it for. Just really enjoyed the process of interviewing all these coaches because I'm genuinely curious. And so I just went with it. And about 6 months later, I thought I may as well start a podcast because radio has limitations, right? So I launched my podcast, but again, it really wasn't in alignment with what I was doing. It was called A Coffee with Karen, as I see you drinking from your
Cheers. Cheers to coffee.
A coffee with Karen, a cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo-woo. I thought it was a fun name, but it had no alignment with my business. And I was teaching organic marketing methods on social media. I was teaching, doing sales trainings. And actually, I was just interviewing coaches. There was no alignment. My business was disjointed, right? And then it was last summer, and I was in my flat. I had the blinds down so the sun didn't heat up the flat too much. And I was feeling stressed because I was constantly chasing, sliding into DMs, trying to get people booked on calls and all this awful stuff to build your business. And then ding, notification. And an email from another host saying, sorry, they're not going to be renewing. And I was actually relying on that renewal to pay some bills. And I was in panic mode. I hit, just have this feeling in my gut that I've got to do something because I'm going to be bankrupt by the end of the year. And so I needed to ditch all the other stuff, all the white noise, and focus in on what I loved doing the most, which was podcasting. And my podcast was working, and I felt that I was a failure because I was just providing a platform. I wasn't giving them any strategy or process. And the stats show that 90% of podcasters don't make it past episode 3. And then out of the 10% that do, 90% don't make it past 20, which is a horrendous stat. And I didn't want that to happen. And I realized I needed to do more. So I needed to sort of reverse engineer what I had been doing. So that's why really now I do what I do. And it is only purely all around podcasting, because I believe that it's the best way to be able to show up as your authentic self. And I know that word is thrown around a lot, but the difference between speaking on stage, where you've got to learn word for word your signature talk, podcasting is so much easier because you just get to show up as you and you just share. And it's so much easier, but you don't know what you don't know. So we needed to sort of give more to our clients to say, look, here, there are 3 steps to this: the pre, the post, and then the promotion. So that's what we do now.
Yeah, it's an amazing story too. And, one of the other benefits about podcasting that most people don't realize. So this is obviously a video podcast, plus we do audio only. But even then, the difference between speaking on stage, we don't need to wear pants. I think people underestimate how important that is. Now, full disclosure, I am wearing pants right now. I can't speak for Karen, but
I'm just going to point out a difference in language between UK and America, right? So pants in America are trousers. Pants in the UK are your undergarments.
Well, I mean, if we're going to go there, technically you don't need either on a podcast. The beautiful benefits of podcasting. Karen, no one is listening to us at this point. So it's just you and me here. So let's unpack what are these 4 steps. Talking about being your authentic self, right? If you're not having fun in your business, you shouldn't be in business. So let's just lay down that foundation. But what are these 4 steps? Because that stat actually, it struck me in the beginning, the 90%, and then the 90% don't think it past episode 20, which blows my mind. But then also getting into this for the first time, when we first started this podcast, I saw why, but I also said, no, I know this provides value to other people, and it's not necessarily about me showing up. It's about providing the value for small business owners and entrepreneurs. And that's what continues to drive me forward. But let's start at the beginning. I mean, if you're going to start a podcast, or even if you have one and it's not that successful, or it's kind of dying off, what do we need to do to start getting this ROI from our podcast?
First of all, I mean, it all needs to be in alignment with what it is you do. So what is, if you're a coach or an expert, whatever it is you do, what is the big result that you offer your clients, right? What is the big promise that they get when they actually work from you? And then make sure that is in alignment. So as I said, my podcast was a Coffee with Karen. Now it's called the Podcast Profits Unleashed podcast. Why? Because that's the same name as my website. It's the same name for my workshops, everything is in alignment. So it's crystal clear to the listener what it is I do as a business, who I help, how I help, and what is the end result. So for me, you mentioned this just earlier about this is fun. Why I wasn't having fun doing all those other things. This is fun, getting on podcast or hosting your own podcast. And when you get it down, when you get it all dialed in, it actually will give you back your time while scaling your business. And yeah, for me, that was a big, important thing. I needed to enjoy what I do. I love what I do. So alignment is key. Thinking of who is your target audience. And then when you create the content for your podcast, you want to create it in such a way that it's actually going to not just attract your ideal client, but sometimes create them, because like I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. And if throughout each episode, you can demonstrate clearly how you help your target audience achieve a specific result, you get to sell without selling, because nobody's selling anything on a podcast. But what you can do is share stories in a way that, like, each story has got to have a point, right? It's got to be in alignment with what it is you do. And that way, it's about shifting the belief in the listener so that they actually come to the conclusion themselves that you are the right fit for them, because you've clearly demonstrated throughout your episode, you've overcome any sort of internal or external limiting beliefs that they might have, right, before they come and work with you. Hopefully that's the end game, right? So that is the step. You got about creating the right kind of content for your target audience that's going to attract them in, shift the belief so that they come to the conclusion themselves that you are the right fit for them. Then, of course, well, how do you turn the listeners into leads? Now, I don't know about you, but quite often when I'm interviewing guests, when it comes to sort of the end, the opportunity, well, what should the listeners do next? Quite often, they ramble off all their social media handles. You know, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Facebook. It's like, no, you've missed an opportunity here, because you're never going to know if somebody's going to has come and checked out your LinkedIn profile. You're never going to know any of this. So by having something of value to give to the listener that would be just the next logical step for them to come into your world, that's immersive, that's something that where, you know, we binge watch box sets on Prime or Netflix, something where they get to see you again, you showing up as your authentic self, that's going to give a little bit more value to then proceed them to the next step. So your podcast can be the front of your funnel. You know, everyone talks about having a funnel and having a lead capture page or an opt-in form. But if you use your podcast to actually do the heavy lifting, because where are people listening? I mean, they're watching this maybe on YouTube. Otherwise, they're listening in the privacy of their own home or their car or on the treadmill. You get to hold the attention, because if you're just constantly posting on social media and stressing, as I was maybe, of trying to create the perfect post, which there isn't, because they've already scrolled, they've forgotten what you posted anyway. Everyone's fighting for attention over there. Whereas on a podcast, you get to hold the attention. And if you do it in the correct way, that is going to turn the listener into a lead to bring them into your world. That way, that's trackable, isn't it? I can tell when I've been on a podcast, I can see my leads go up. I know I got an ROI from that. But if I just said, yeah, go find me here, go find me there, I wouldn't know. So it's about turning, what are you going to do and how are you going to articulate that to give value to the listener? That is, you know, it's no cost. You know, you can't just jump into a high ticket product here. It's about bringing them in to your sales funnel, as it were, to give them a little bit more of experience of what it would be like working with you. Because you know, with this kind of thing, like I'm not going to attract certain types. Like I'm looking pretty sort of, I would say, normal right now. I've normally got pink braids and I might be a little bit all over the place. I get very passionate. I might not attract corporate clients, and I'm okay with that. And the beauty is with your podcast is you don't take any rejection, because you don't know who's listening. And if they're listening, they're interested in the content that you're giving out. So you get to show up and serve who is showing up to listen to your podcast. For me, it's just the most least resistant way of building your business, because you really are going to attract the right fit for you. And when you get over this, you know, I'm not going to be the right fit for everyone. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. And that's what I think does make it fun, because you don't face any personal rejection ever. They will come into your world when they're ready, because it's not about you. It's about the listener.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that bugs me so much is the phase two where you haven't thought about the clear next step for the listener. So for example, on this show, I do not offer our own lead magnets. If you want to work with us, that's more of like, I give that on other shows where I'm a guest. We only talk about our guests here, which is you in this case. But when we have guests on who just say, oh, find me on social media at this handle, whatever, it doesn't make sense because you just said it. You're competing with, now you're on another platform competing with everybody else in the world putting out content. And I've gone so far as to, when I'm a guest on other shows, myself and my business partner, if they ask us for a lead magnet, we have one. If they say, where can the guest find you on social media? I literally say, and there's episodes out there of me saying, I don't care. Don't find me on social media. I'm leading you to the same place, to that lead magnet. We call it something different, but I'm like, do not follow me on social media. You go there if you want more information. And it's just, you're opening up the world to be more confused about who you are in their world. So that's a fantastic way to describe step two, Karen. Thank you.
Yes. And all your podcasts, you know, that if you're guesting on people's podcasts, there's one thing you know for sure is that their audience are consuming audio content.
There you go.
So it makes sense. But I think we overcomplicate things. Look, and you know, I've done this myself. I'm not saying I haven't, because I have, you know, because going back to, you don't know what you don't know. So I was doing this without any thought process of, you know, what do you want the listener to do? And now it makes so much sense. It saves me time. It's just easier. And you just get to show up on your podcast, whether you're a guest, whether you're a host, whether it's a solo episode, whether you're interviewing, you show up as your authentic self. And the listener, you don't know where they are on their journey. And that's okay, because you as long as you just commit to showing up. You know, I used to always say 80% is just showing up. And then I did see a post. So I admit, I saw a post on social media by Steve Bartlett. And he said 99%. So I'm going to go with the 9. Yeah, I agree with him. 99%. I've changed it. I've changed my stat, because I got my stat from Stephen Bartlett. He said 99% of it is just committing to showing up, because you want to build the know, like, and trust factor. Well, look, they can look back and go, I don't know. I don't even know where we are. Episode 223, I think we've just launched. Right. They know I'm not going anywhere. I've made a commitment to show up and serve my audience. And that is it. So it's just, for me, it's a very easy way, even though I think for a lot of listeners think, oh, podcast on top of everything. Oh, it's too much to do. But you can use that one piece of content. That one piece of weekly content can be used in the written format. It can be used as video, like here. Okay, it's a video. You're going to use the audio for the actual podcast. You've got the audio. You can create some short form videos, whether that's 25 seconds, whether that's 6 minutes, all from one piece of content. So it will actually give you back your time, because there you go. There's if you want to use social media as well, you've got your social media strategy that drives everybody back to your podcast or to your opt-in. So it becomes part of your ecosystem, and it's going to be a self-fulfilling pipeline over time. None of this isn't, you know, I'll hasten to add, this isn't a short-term strategy. It's not a transactional thing. It's about building trust and about building relationships with the guests that you have on. I've met the most amazing people, some that I know I'm going to meet in person when I'm out on my travels later on this year. So for me, it's just been, I would never have met the people that I've met. We wouldn't be having this conversation. Whereabouts are you, Brandon?
Well, I'm across the pond. I'm in North Carolina. You're in the UK. This whole platform, everything you just said, is a cheat code. I'm convinced. It's a totally brilliant platform. So Karen, if we haven't sold the listener at this point to start or revive a podcast or double down on it, I don't know what's going to change their hearts. But You have 2 more steps. I want to see if we could breeze through them. But before we get there, you also have, you ate your own dog food, so to speak, and you have a gift for the listener. So tell me about that first, and then we'll dive into steps 3 and 4.
That is really that's for coaches and experts who want to use their podcast to turn it into a sales machine. That will just give you your blueprint to create this ecosystem. So it's a short mini course that you can binge watch at your leisure. So yeah, take a look at that.
I love it. Awesome. So we have 2 more steps 3 and step 4 to get an ROI from your podcast.
Well, step 1 was the alignment.
Yeah.
Making sure it's an alignment. Step 2 was the actual creating the content that's going to attract your ideal client. Step 3 is the how to turn the listeners into leads. Okay. So sorry, I wasn't clear enough on those different steps. Step 4 is, you need to grow. You need to grow your listeners. So, well, we sort of said it already. One of the best ways is to then go and guest on other people's podcasts because they're consuming audio content. And the fact that podcasting is evergreen. So we've got so many tools out there, guys. Secret tip, the AI is here. You don't have to spend hours doing this stuff. You can get the transcription of your episode, put it into ChatGPT and say, can you write me a blog post using high ranking, SEO rich keywords? There you go. You've got a blog. And what you do on the blog, 1 sentence hook question to encourage the readers, because these are readers, aren't they, on blogs, to listen to the podcast. And then you can actually embed that particular episode there before you write the blog post. And then what I do is a double whammy, is add the YouTube video at the bottom. So then you've hit the people who like to read, people who like to listen, people who like to watch. That way you are going to, blogs are another long-term strategy to actually grow. Guess what? Your podcast. So it all comes back. And so everything intertwines with everything else.
Yeah, it's much bigger than you probably think by just saying like, oh, it's a podcast. I listen to a podcast, realizing what goes into it and what makes it grow and successful. I'm no expert. Karen obviously is, but I'm just saying you have to put this much effort into it if you're going to think about growing it long term. And really it's thinking of it as its own business model, which I think that's where a lot of people fall short is, and you said it too, when people quit, they're like, I'm just not getting downloads. I'm not getting listeners. I've done 7 episodes and nothing's happening. It's like, you can't expect to have a return on your investment in 7 days or weeks, however frequently you release episodes. So having that long-term strategy. Karen, this has been a fantastic episode. Thank you for shining light on this incredible medium.
Well, thank you once again for having me. A fellow podcaster. Yeah, it's been great.
I love it. So I do love to end these episodes with a question, but it's a question from you to the listener. So if somebody has a podcast, they wanted to grow, they want to start a podcast, revive a podcast, everything we talked about, I believe that powerful questions get powerful answers. So what is a question they should ask themselves if they want to take that next step, get an ROI from their podcast, grow their listeners, grow their business of podcasting? What is that powerful question you want them to ask?
If nothing changed this time next year, how would you feel?
That's an interesting question.
If what you're doing currently to build your business isn't working, wouldn't it be worth taking a look at doing it slightly differently, getting your time back, and actually have some fun, bring some fun back into your business?
That's a fantastic question. And those are 2 things that we stand for on this show: getting your time back and having a lot of fun. This has been an amazing episode. Karen, thank you so much for being here. And for those of you watching and listening, wherever you are, take that next step. Go to podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free. It's down in the show notes, wherever you're watching or listening. Go check out more of Karen, learn how you can grow your podcast, and also subscribe. We love putting these episodes on every single day of the week so we can help you grow your business, get your time back, have more fun, and just live a harmonious life. That's what we're all about here. We'll see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.